What we saw down here today is pure evil.
I think this would be an anomaly anywhere it would have taken place, whether it's Southern Ohio or anywhere else.
It's horrific. That's just nasty. It's horrific, really is.
It's stupid that it's happening close to Wellston and Vinton County. Vinton County, I mean, you don't know what's going on this road anymore.
I think that there are some real concerns with homeschooling, especially in Ohio, since it's changed in the last couple of years.
On June 30th, 2026, the Ohio Attorney General stood in front of a podium and used two words no elected official says lightly: pure evil. Not alleged, not under investigation. Pure evil from the state's top law enforcement officer, on the record, before a single person had been indicted. Here's the image to hold on to for the rest of this video. A room measuring 12 feet by 12 feet. That's the size of a one-car garage. Now put 16 children inside it. A toddler barely old enough to walk on one end, a legal adult on the other, and understand that investigators believe some of them spent close to 4 years of their lives never leaving it. That single room is the entire story. Everything else, the marriages, the truancy records, the homeschooling paperwork, is just the paper trail that let that room exist for as long as it did. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. The knock came on a Tuesday morning, around 10 a.m., in Hampton.
It happened on a Tuesday morning around 10 a.m. in a village so small most Ohioans couldn't point to it on a map. Hampden, Ohio, sits in Vinton County, roughly 60 miles southeast of Columbus and about 2 hours from Cincinnati. Fewer than 1,000 people live there. It's the kind of place with more trees than traffic lights, tucked into the hill country of Appalachian, Ohio, in a county that is, and this is not an exaggeration, it is a matter of public record, one of the poorest and least populated counties in the entire state. Deputies from the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, backed up by agents from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, pulled up to a modest home on Omar Street that morning with a search warrant in hand. On paper, this was supposed to be routine. They weren't there because of any tip about children. They weren't expecting what they were about to walk into. According to officials, this search was connected to a separate ongoing parallel investigation, one authorities have publicly tied to allegations of domestic abuse and child neglect that had been building for roughly a month. It's worth sitting with that for a second. Law enforcement had already been circling this family for weeks before June 30th, without yet knowing what was behind that door.
Ohio, a village in Vinton County so small it barely registers on a map, in a county officials themselves describe as one of the poorest and least populated in the state. Deputies and agents from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation arrived with a search warrant tied to a separate, ongoing case. Allegations of domestic abuse and neglect that had reportedly been building for about a month. They weren't there looking for 16 children. They found them anyway. What happened next is the moment this stopped being a local case. Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane, a man with 22 years on the job, told reporters nothing in his career had prepared him for what he saw that day.
Living in a single 12 by 12-foot room. The children ranged in age from about 18 months old to 18 years old. Some reports put the youngest closer to 20 months. Either way, we are talking about a baby not yet old enough to walk confidently on one end and a legal adult on the other, sharing the same room, the same conditions, the same walls. Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane, a man with 22 years in law enforcement, told reporters that nothing in his career had prepared him for what he saw that day.
It was disgusting even where the kids weren't. I would think it's typical. Most law enforcement have experience with homes in a similar fashion. A large number of people, though, the children were kept in a roughly 12 by 12 area. it seems like is where they've spent the most of the last 4 years, and that's what it looks like. In a weird way, you're hit with two emotions. There is joy when we realize that we're about to change 16 lives for the better, but you're also it's hard.
7 of the 16 children needed immediate medical treatment. 2 were airlifted to level 1 trauma centers because whatever had happened to them was too severe for a local hospital to handle. The Attorney General didn't use clinical language to describe the scene. He used the word feral.
Ohio Attorney General Andy Wilson was blunter still.
Rural Ohio, and I've just never seen anything like I saw today with respect to those kids. As we sat and we talked about it, the team kind of talked about it, it really looked third world. It's the type of thing that we're not used to seeing here in America.
Several of the 16 were in serious enough condition that they needed immediate hospitalization. 7 children in total were taken to medical facilities. 2 of them were airlifted, care-flighted in the language investigators used, to level 1 trauma centers because their injuries were considered too severe for a local hospital to handle.
For people were arrested that day, spanning 3 generations of one family. Gary Siders Sr., 73. His wife, Christina Siders, 67. Their son, Gary Siders II, 36. And his wife, Elizabeth Siders, 33, the biological mother of all 16 children in that room. Each of them was charged with 16 counts of felony child endangering. 1 count for every child pulled out of that house. Now here's the first documented fact that reframes everything. Elizabeth Siders was born Elizabeth Russell, and she married Gary Siders II in March of 2008, at 15 years old.
Elizabeth Siders was born Elizabeth Russell. In March of 2008, at 15 years old, she married Gary Siders II, who was 18. And here's the detail that has since become one of the most consequential facts in this entire case. They didn't get married in Ohio. They crossed the state line into Mason County, West Virginia, where, at the time, the law allowed a minor to marry at any age, with a parent's consent. What almost nobody realized until reporters started digging. It likely didn't matter which state they picked. In 2008, Ohio itself had no minimum marriage age on the books at all. The trip to West Virginia may not have even been legally necessary. They made it anyway. 2 months after the wedding, in May of 2008, Elizabeth gave birth to her first child, meaning she was already pregnant on her wedding day. That child, now 18 years old, was found in the room on Omar Street on June 30th, 2026, 18 years almost to the month after being born. According to investigators, that oldest child is developmentally delayed, described as nonverbal and unable to write their own name. Elizabeth's brother-in-law, Ronnie Fletcher, who is married to one of Gary Jr.'s 4.
The couple crossed into West Virginia to marry, where the law at the time allowed a minor to wed at any age with parental consent. But dig into the record a little further, and the trip becomes almost pointless, because in 2008, Ohio itself had no minimum marriage age on the books at all. She didn't need to leave the state. The system simply didn't require her to. She was already pregnant on her wedding day. That child, now 18, was one of the 16 found in the room this June, 18 years almost to the month after being born, and is described by investigators as developmentally delayed, nonverbal, unable to write their own name. So ask yourself the question this case keeps circling back to. At what exact point does a 15-year-old bride stop being treated as a child under the law and start being treated as an adult responsible for everything that follows? Because Ohio's legal system never actually answered that question for her. It just let the clock run. Over the next 17 years, court and birth records show Elizabeth Siders gave birth 18 times. 16 of those children survived and were the ones removed from the home. 2 did not. In November of 2022, She delivered conjoined twin girls, Faith Lee Siders and Bailey Lee Siders, born at just 24 weeks.
Threads in the entire investigation. Over the 17 years that followed, that one marriage would produce 18 pregnancies. Court and birth records reviewed by multiple outlets show that Elizabeth Siders gave birth roughly once a year for nearly 2 decades. The pattern researchers pieced together shows children born in 2008, then again in close succession through the 2010s, and continuing all the way into 2025. In total, Elizabeth is believed to have given birth 18 times over 17 years. 16 of those children were alive and were the ones pulled from the home on June 30th. 2 did not survive. In November of 2022, Elizabeth gave birth to twin girls at a hospital in Columbus. They were born at just 24 weeks, dramatically premature, and were conjoined. Their names, according to birth and death records, were Faith Lee Siders and Bailey Lee Siders. Both died of natural causes within an hour of being born. Some forensic experts who've reviewed the case publicly have pointed to this exact moment as a missed opportunity for intervention. The conjoined twins were not the only twins. Court records reviewed by reporters show that among the 16 surviving children, there are 3 separate sets of twins. One set was 4 years old at the time of the rescue, one set was 2, and one set was just 1 year old. 3 sets of twins, one set of twins who died, all born to the same mother, inside a period of roughly 4 years.
Both died of natural causes within an hour of birth. Multiple forensic experts who've reviewed this case publicly have pointed to that hospital visit, a documented, medically supervised event, as a missed opportunity for someone, anyone, in the system to intervene. Among the 16 surviving children, records show 3 separate sets of twins, born within a roughly 4-year window. This is not a story of a family that grew quietly. It's a story that generated a hospital paper trail repeatedly for 2 decades, and none of those documents connected to each other in time to matter. That failure to connect the dots isn't an accident of geography. It's the mechanism. Investigators say the family moved across at least 5 Ohio counties and 1 other state over the past 20 years, Gallia, Pike, Jackson, Vinton, a stretch in Wisconsin, before settling into the Vinton County house roughly 4 years before the raid. The Attorney General's office stated plainly that investigators believe this movement was used to avoid establishing consistent medical and government records.
5 different counties and 1 entire other state over the past 2 decades. Gallia County, Pike County, Jackson County and Vinton County in Ohio, plus a stretch of time living in Wisconsin before settling into the house on Omar Street roughly 4 years before the raid. Court records show the family had connections to Gallia County as early as 2005 and as late as 2017. Attorney General Wilson didn't mince words about what that pattern of movement likely accomplished. Investigators, he said, believe the family largely avoided establishing medical and other government records during those years, meaning every time the family crossed a county line, they may have effectively reset the clock on anyone connecting the dots.
Every county line crossed was a reset button on anyone piecing the family's history together. Before Vinton County, the family lived on a rental property in Gallia County. A former neighbor who worked nearby told reporters that when the family moved out, the house had to be fully renovated. Human and pet waste throughout the property. Floorboards reportedly so saturated the new owners had to relay the foundation. Padlocks were installed on interior doors.
One of the more chilling pieces of reporting to emerge came from a home the family lived in before Vinton County, a rental near Cheshire, Ohio, on a street called Honeysuckle in Gallia County, where records show the family lived between roughly 2020 and 2024. A woman who worked nearby told reporters that after the Siders moved out, the house was left in such bad condition that the owner had to fully renovate it. She described human and pet feces and urine throughout the property, along with piles of trash. Journalists investigating the case separately reported an even more specific claim, sourced to former neighbours who had walked through the property afterward. The floorboards were reportedly so saturated with urine that the new owners had to relay the foundations of the house. The same reporting described padlocks installed on doors throughout that residence. A neighbour across the street from the Cheshire home told reporters the children mostly stayed inside, though he had occasionally seen them playing outside, and at the time he estimated there were around 9 of them. A relative named Terry Siders, only distantly connected to this branch of the family, told NBC News she hadn't heard from them in at least 8 years. "I knew little Gary had kids, yeah," she said. "I don't remember meeting any of the kids, though. I knew they had a lot of kids through family talking years ago, but there's no way I thought they had that many kids." Even people who shared the family's last name, who had heard second-hand about a lot of kids, had no real sense of the scale of what was happening. This is maybe the most infuriating part of the entire case.
A neighbor across the street said he rarely saw the children outside, and when he did, he estimated there were around 9 of them, a number that, on paper, was already an undercount of what was coming. And here is where the system's own records show it almost caught this. In October of 2021, the Gallia County School District filed a formal truancy complaint against Gary Siders II and Elizabeth Siders.
Because it shows a system that actually did try to catch this, and still failed. In October of 2021, the Gallia County School District filed a formal truancy complaint against Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. The complaint stated that their 6 oldest children, at the time ranging in age from 6 to 12 years old, had not attended a single day of school that entire school year. Not one day. The district considered them habitually truant, a legal status that can escalate toward the children themselves being labelled unruly. Those 6 children were, on paper, enrolled at Adderville Elementary School. Here's the detail that makes it worse. Reporters later obtained records showing that when officials tried to actually serve that truancy complaint on the family, they couldn't. Process servers were unable to locate them. The Siders had already moved on. A year before that truancy complaint, in August of 2020, Elizabeth had enrolled those same 6 children in an online program called the Southern Ohio Digital Academy, right at the deadline required by Ohio law. Whether the children ever actually logged in, completed a single module, or took a single test is something the school district has said it cannot release, and as far as anyone can tell, was never actually verified by anyone outside the family. Then, in October of 2023, Ohio changed its homeschooling law.
Their 6 oldest children, ages 6 to 12 at the time, had not attended a single day of school that entire academic year. Process servers went looking to formally serve that complaint. They couldn't find the family. The Siders had already relocated. A year earlier, in August of 2020, Elizabeth had enrolled those same 6 children in an online school, right at Ohio's legal filing deadline. Whether a single one of those children ever logged into a single lesson is something the school district says it cannot confirm. And as far as public record shows, no one outside the family ever verified it either. Then, in October of 2023, Ohio changed its homeschool law, where parents once had to submit curriculum for review and have a licensed teacher sign off on a child's progress. The new law required only a simple notice. No curriculum, no sign-off, no assessment. The county superintendent overseeing this exact district said it publicly, without commenting on this case directly. Past that initial notice, there is no accountability. And mandatory reporters, the teachers trained to spot neglect in a child's face, never got the chance to see these children's faces at all.
The way that experts say made a case exactly like this one significantly harder to catch. Before that change, a parent who wanted to homeschool had to submit their curriculum to the local school district and have a licensed teacher sign off on the child's progress, or have the child take a state assessment. After the law changed, all a parent has to do is submit a simple notice. No curriculum review, no licensed teacher sign-off, no assessments of any kind. Gallia County Superintendent Philip Kuhn, speaking publicly about the broader issue without commenting directly on the Siders case, which he said he legally could not do, put it plainly, under the new system there's no accountability past that initial notice. He noted that his own district has seen homeschooling numbers climb from just 34 students over a decade and a half ago to 284 students most recently, nearly 13% of the entire district. He also pointed out something specific to how these systems interact. School staff are mandatory reporters, trained to spot the early signs of neglect and abuse in children they see every day. A child who is homeschooled, especially under a system with zero required check-ins, is a child that entire safety net simply never sees. Whether the Siders children were ever meaningfully homeschooled, online schooled, or simply left with no schooling at all remains one of the open questions in this case.
This is the moral center of this entire case. Pure evil didn't hide in the dark. It hid in paperwork that was technically, legally, on file. The final month before the raid adds a layer investigators still haven't fully resolved. In May of 2026, Gary Siders, too, was accused of indecent exposure on 4 separate occasions. The warrant for those charges was signed on June 30th, the exact same day deputies executed the search that found the 16 children.
A month before the raid, in May of 2026, authorities allege Gary Siders Jr. exposed himself to people outside his own household on 4 separate occasions: May 23rd, May 27th, May 29th, and May 31st. A warrant connected to those allegations, 4 counts of public indecency, a 4th-degree misdemeanor, was formally issued on June 30th. The exact same day, deputies executed the search warrant at the house and found the 16 children. Because of that timing, a lot of early reporting assumed the 2 things were directly connected. That police went to that house specifically because of the indecent exposure allegations. Officials have never fully confirmed that. In fact, some reporting has specifically stated the opposite, that the search stemmed from a separate parallel investigation tied to allegations of domestic abuse and child neglect, one that had reportedly already been underway for roughly a month before the raid, completely apart from the public indecency case. Defense attorneys for the family have gone on record saying they don't believe the indecent exposure case was the reason authorities showed up at all.
Officials have never confirmed whether those 2 threads were connected, and some reporting has stated they were entirely separate investigations that simply collided on the calendar. The officer who filed that indecent exposure complaint wasn't even a local deputy. Court records show it was a special agent from the same State Bureau of Criminal Investigation unit that assisted with the search of the home.
One detail that hasn't gotten much attention: the officer who filed the complaint in the public indecency case wasn't even a local Vinton County deputy. Court records show it was a special agent from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the same state-level unit, notably, that assisted with the search of the Siders' home. BCI agents typically handle major felonies, crimes against children and the elderly, and other cases beyond the scope of a small rural sheriff's department. Their presence on the indecent exposure complaint weeks before...
That's not standard procedure for a routine misdemeanor complaint. That's a detail worth sitting with. Not every fact in this case is held up cleanly, and pure evil is a phrase that gets complicated the deeper you look. Elizabeth's own attorney has stated she has no prior criminal record and no history of failing to appear in court, factors courts weigh directly. The defense representing Gary Siders Sr. has publicly challenged the feral and illiterate characterizations, pointing to documented social media accounts belonging to at least 2 of the older children.
Not every claim about the case has held up cleanly under scrutiny, and that itself is a detail worth knowing. Dorian Baum, the attorney representing Gary Siders Sr., pushed back hard and publicly on the feral and illiterate characterizations. He pointed out that at least a few of the older children, including the 2 oldest, appear to have had active social media accounts, including Facebook and Snapchat pages with posts and private messages on record. One set of messages, reportedly between one of the older girls and someone she referred to online as an internet boyfriend overseas, has circulated as evidence that at least some communication and outside contact existed, complicating the picture of total isolation. Baum's argument was blunt. If these kids were as illiterate and cut off as officials claimed, how were they posting online at all? Prosecutors and reporters covering the case have acknowledged this is a genuine open question. The children's actual literacy, verbal ability, and level of isolation appear to have varied significantly from child to
Vinton County's own sheriff, when asked directly whether Elizabeth is being investigated as a possible victim herself, gave an answer that was neither confirmation nor denial, only that it remains part of the ongoing investigation. And that's the unresolved center of this case months later. Pure evil was the phrase used to describe what officers found in that 12-by-12 room. But the paper trail behind it, the truancy complaint no one could serve, the homeschool law rewritten to require nothing, the marriage age with no floor at all, raises a harder question than who is guilty. It asks how many other rooms just like this one are currently sitting behind paperwork that, on file, looks completely fine. If you want to look at this yourself, the Gallia County School District's October 2021 truancy filing and Ohio Senate Bill 341 are both public record. Read them. Then tell us in the comments, where exactly do you think the system failed first? If this investigation mattered to you, like it, share it, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the crime infinity, because we don't stop when the headlines do.